The vote was finished. 12 alien species had gathered in the Great Hall of the Galactic Tribunal. They had debated for 7 days and 7 nights. They had argued and shouted and whispered. But in the end, the decision was simple. Humanity had to die. Admiral Vorik stood at the edge of the hall and watched the final vote appear on the massive screen above. 11 votes for extinction. 1 abstention. 0 votes against. He smiled, though his face was not made for smiling. His people, the Vectori, had waited 300 years for this moment. They had watched the humans crawl out of their small blue planet. They had watched them spread to the moon, then to Mars, then to the moons of Jupiter. And with each step, the Vectori grew more afraid. Humans were not like other species. They did not follow the rules. They did not respect the old ways. They built weapons when they should have built temples. They fought when they should have surrendered. They asked questions when they should have stayed silent. The galaxy had seen many dangerous species before. All of them had been dealt with. Now it was humanity's turn. Vorik turned to his second officer, a tall female named Praxis. "Prepare the fleet," he said. "All 500 ships. We leave within the hour." Praxis nodded and hurried away. She did not question the order. No one questioned Vorik. He had been an admiral for 60 years. He had destroyed 11 species and conquered 40 worlds. Humanity would be his greatest victory. Far across the galaxy, Earth turned slowly in the darkness of space. The people who lived there did not know what was coming. They went to work. They ate their dinners. They kissed their children goodnight. They looked up at the stars and wondered if anyone was out there. Someone was, and they were coming to kill every single one of them. In a small office on the moon, an old woman named Bora sat alone. She was 87 years old. Her hair was white and thin. Her hand shook when she tried to hold her coffee, but her eyes were still sharp. They had seen things that most people could not imagine. Bora had been an admiral once. That was a long time ago, during the First Contact War. The history books did not talk about that war anymore. The government had erased most of the records. They said it was to maintain peace with the alien species. Bora knew the real reason. They were ashamed. They were ashamed because humanity had won. Not by being smarter. Not by being stronger. Humanity had won by being too stubborn to die. Bora's computer beeped. She looked at the screen and felt her old heart stop for a moment. The message was from a friend in the intelligence service. It was only 3 words. "They are coming." She read it again. And again. Then she closed her eyes and remembered. 50 years ago, she had stood on the bridge of a frigate called the Magongwa. The name meant Rose of Sharon in the old Korean language. It was the national flower of a country that no longer existed. A country that had merged with others to form the United Earth Government. But the name remained. Names have power. The Magongwa had been small and ugly. Its weapons were primitive. Its shields were weak. But it had fought in the First Contact War, and it had survived. More than survived. It had made the aliens afraid. After the war, the government wanted to forget. They made peace treaties. They agreed to limit their weapons. They promised to be good little humans and follow the rules. And they ordered the Magongwa to be destroyed. Bora had disobeyed that order. She had hidden the ship in an asteroid field near Jupiter. For 40 years, it had waited in the darkness. She had always known this day would come. The aliens would never truly accept humanity. They were too different, too afraid. Sooner or later, they would try to finish what they started. Now that day had arrived. Bora picked up her communicator and dialed a number she had not used in 15 years. It rang for a long time. Finally, a tired voice answered. "What?" the voice said. It was rough and angry. "Taiho," Bora said. "It's me." There was a long silence. Then the voice spoke again. "Bora, I told you never to call me again." "I know, but they are coming. All of them. 500 warships." Another silence. Bora could hear breathing on the other end. Heavy and slow. "Then we're dead," Taiho said. "The Defense Force has 40 ships. Maybe 50. It won't matter." "I know," Bora said. "That's why I need you. I need the Magunwa." The silence this time was different. It was not angry. It was something else. Something that might have been hope. Captain Taiho sat in a bar on Mars. He was 63 years old. His hair was gray and messy. His uniform was gone, replaced by old civilian clothes that did not fit well. On the table in front of him were 7 empty glasses and 1 full one. He had been drinking for 3 days. Or maybe 4. He had lost count. 15 years ago, he had been a hero. The youngest captain in the Terran Defense Force. The man who had led the successful defense of the Jupiter colonies. The man who had refused to retreat when his commanders ordered him to. The man who had won. They had given him medals. They had put his face on the news. And then, quietly, they had destroyed him. Disobeying orders was a crime. It did not matter that he had saved 10,000 lives. It did not matter that his tactics had worked. He had made the admirals look bad. He had made them look weak. So they had taken everything from him. His rank, his ship, his purpose. Now he spent his days drinking and his nights dreaming of stars he would never see again. "The Magunwa," he whispered into the communicator. "You kept it." "I kept it," Bora confirmed. "It's old. It's broken. It needs a crew. But it's still there." Taiho closed his eyes. He could see the ship in his mind. He could feel the controls under his hands. He could hear the engines humming. 1 frigate against 500 warships, he said. "You know that's suicide." "Probably," Bora agreed. "But I'm too old to fly her. And you're the only captain crazy enough to try." Taiho laughed. It was a bitter sound. "Crazy. Yes, that's what they called me. Right before they took everything. Will you do it?" Bora asked. He looked at the full glass in front of him. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. Not from fear. From something else. From a feeling he had not felt in 15 years. Purpose. He picked up the glass and poured it onto the floor. "Send me the coordinates," he said. "I'm on my way." Across the galaxy, 500 warships began to move. They arranged themselves in perfect formation, a wall of metal and death stretching across the void. Their weapons were charged. Their crews were ready. They had been told that this mission would be easy. The humans had no real ships, no real weapons. They would not even put up a fight. Admiral Vorik stood on his bridge and watched his fleet move forward. He felt proud. He felt powerful. He felt certain of victory. He had no idea what was waiting for him. In the darkness of an asteroid field, hidden from all sensors and all eyes, an old ship waited. Its lights were off. Its engines were cold. Its hull was scarred from battles that history had forgotten. But it was not dead. It was sleeping. And soon, very soon, it would wake up. The asteroid field was dark and cold. Millions of rocks floated in the emptiness, spinning slowly, bumping into each other, going nowhere. No one came here. There was nothing to find. Nothing worth seeing. That was exactly why Bora had chosen this place. Taiho's small shuttle moved carefully through the rocks. He was sober now, completely sober for the first time in months. His hands were steady on the controls. His eyes were focused. He felt alive again. The coordinates led him deeper into the field. past rocks the size of houses, past rocks the size of mountains. And then he saw it. The Mugunwa. She floated in the shadow of a massive asteroid, hidden from the sun and from any sensors. She was exactly as he remembered her, ugly, angular. Her hull was covered in scars and patches. Different metals had been welded together in ways that looked wrong. Her weapons stuck out at strange angles. Her engines were too big for her body. She was the most beautiful thing Taiho had ever seen. He docked his shuttle and stepped through the airlock. The inside of the ship was dark. The air was cold and stale. Dust covered every surface. But as he walked through the corridor, the lights began to flicker on, one by one, as if the ship recognized him, as if it was waking up. Taiho made his way to the bridge. The captain's chair was empty. It had been waiting for him for 40 years. He sat down and touched the console in front of him. The screens came to life. Systems began to activate. The ship's computer spoke in a calm female voice. "Welcome back, Captain. All systems are in standby mode. Power reserves at 12%. 12%. That was not enough to fight. That was barely enough to fly." Taiho smiled anyway. "Hello, old friend," he said. The next problem was the crew. The Mugunwa was designed for 40 people. Taiho had himself. That was not going to work. He sent out messages through channels that the government did not monitor. Old military frequencies. Encrypted codes from the war. He asked for volunteers. He told them the truth. This was probably a one-way mission. They would be fighting against impossible odds. They would probably die. The responses came faster than he expected. The first to arrive was Yuna. She was 51 years old, with short gray hair and grease stains on her hands that never seemed to wash off. She had been the chief engineer on 3 different ships before being blacklisted by the Defense Force. Her crime was creative interpretation of safety regulations. In simple words, she fixed things in ways that were not in the manual. Sometimes her fixes worked better than the original designs. Sometimes they exploded. There was no middle ground with Yuna. She walked onto the Magandwa and immediately disappeared into the engine room. 2 hours later, she came back to the bridge. "The reactor is old but solid," she reported. "The power systems are a mess. Give me 3 days and I can get you full power. Maybe more than full power." "We have 2 days," Taiho said. Yuna grinned. "Then I'll skip sleeping." The next to arrive was Dohan. He was only 26, young and eager. He had never seen real combat, but he had spent his entire adult life studying the First Contact War. He knew every battle, every tactic, every victory. He had written papers about the Mugunwa that no journal would publish. He said the old ways were better. The military said he was wasting his time. When he saw the rail cannons for the first time, he almost cried. "They're beautiful," he whispered. "Magnetic acceleration. Tungsten rounds. No energy signatures for the enemy to track." He turned to Taiho with shining eyes. "Sir, do you know how much damage these can do?" "I know," Taiho said. He had used them before. Yunji came next. She was 40 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and a face that showed nothing. She said she was a navigator. Taiho checked her records and found that most of them were classified. The parts he could read mentioned special operations, deep space missions, and several incidents that were marked resolved without official report. He asked her one question. "Can you fly us through a battle?" She looked at him with steady eyes. "I can fly us through hell." Taiho believed her. The communications officer was the youngest. Her name was Jiwoo, and she was only 22. She had been expelled from the Naval Academy 6 months before graduation. Her crime was hacking into hegemony transmissions. She had learned their language. She had decoded their encryption. She had listened to their secrets. The Academy called it a security breach. Jiwoo called it research. "I know how they think," she told Taiho. "I know how they talk. I can confuse them, misdirect them, make them fight each other instead of us." Taiho nodded. "Good. We'll need every trick we can get." More crew members arrived. A gunner who had been discharged for excessive aggression. A sensor operator who saw patterns that no one else could see. A damage control specialist who had survived 3 ships being destroyed around her. All of them were outcasts. All of them were forgotten. All of them were angry. And then Grandma Suk arrived. She was 74 years old. Her hair was completely white. Her back was bent. She walked with a cane. And she had served on the Mugunhua during the First Contact War 50 years ago. Taiho stared at her. "You should be retired." "I am retired," she said. "I was enjoying my retirement. I had a nice garden, good tea, quiet mornings." She looked around the bridge with old eyes that still held fire. "Then I heard that some fool was taking my ship to fight 500 alien warships, and I thought, well, someone needs to keep these idiots alive." She was the ship's doctor. She had been the ship's doctor 50 years ago. She was the only person alive who had served on the Mugunwu in her glory days. "The old captain was a good man," she told Taiho quietly. "He died in the last battle of the war. Made me promise to take care of the ship." She smiled, and her face wrinkled like old paper. "I've been waiting 40 years to keep that promise." By the time all the volunteers had arrived, they had 12 crew members. 12 people to run a ship designed for 40. 12 people to fight against 500 warships. It was not enough. It would have to be enough. Yuna worked without sleep for 40 hours straight. She rewired the power systems. She rebuilt the reactor controls. She did things to the engines that should not have been possible. When she was finished, the Mugunhwa had more power than the day it was built. "Don't ask how," she said when Taiho questioned her. "You won't like the answer." Doham spent his time with the weapons. He tested the rail cannons. He counted the ammunition. He armed the nuclear torpedoes that have been sitting in storage for 4 decades. The warheads were still good. They would still explode. "The aliens abandoned kinetic weapons centuries ago," he explained to the crew. "They think energy weapons are more advanced, more civilized. Their shields are designed to stop energy, not mass. They won't know what hit them." Yoonji sat at the navigation console and studied the approach, routes to Earth. She calculated angles and speeds and trajectories. She found paths through the chaos that no computer would suggest. Paths that relied on human instinct, human madness. Jiwoo practiced her hacking. She broke into old hegemony files. She learned their command structures. She found their weaknesses. She prepared surprises that would make them very unhappy. And Taiho watched them all. His crew, his family. The forgotten, the rejected, the impossible. 1 frigate against 500 warships, Yuna said on the second night. "This is suicide." Taiho looked at her. Then he looked at the viewport, at the stars waiting beyond the asteroid field. "No," he said. "This is Tuesday." No one laughed. But no one left, either. On the morning of the 3rd day, the engines roared to life. The lights came on full. The systems activated. The Mugunhwa shook herself awake like an old dog stretching after a long sleep. Taiho sat in the captain's chair. His crew sat at their stations. Behind them, Earth waited. In front of them, death waited. He took a deep breath. "All hands," he said into the intercom. "This is the captain speaking. We are about to do something very stupid. We are about to fight the entire hegemony fleet with 1 old ship and 12 tired people. Most of us will probably die." He paused. "But we are human. Dying is not the same as losing. And we have never, ever learned how to lose." He looked at Yunji. "Take us out." The Magunghwa moved forward, out of the asteroid field, toward the light of the sun, toward the battle that would change everything. The hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. 500 warships appeared in the darkness like a sudden storm. Each ship was massive, beautiful, deadly. Their hulls were smooth and white, designed by artists as much as engineers. Their weapons glowed with soft blue light. Their shields hummed with power that humans could not understand. Admiral Vorik stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment. It was the largest ship in the fleet, nearly 2 kilometers long. Its weapons could destroy a small moon. Its shields could survive a close pass by a star. It was perfection made metal. Vorik looked at the small blue planet in the distance, Earth, the home of humanity. Soon it would be nothing but ash and memory. "Begin the broadcast," he ordered. Across the galaxy, observation drones activated. Their signals reached 1,000 worlds, 1,000,000 screens. Species who lived under the hegemony's protection gathered to watch. Some were curious. Some were afraid. Some were excited. This was going to be entertainment. The death of a species that had dared to be different. A lesson for anyone who might think about resisting the hegemony's rule. Near Earth's orbit, the Terran Defense Force formed a thin line. 47 ships, the best humanity had. Modern cruisers with the latest technology. Fast destroyers with powerful weapons. Carriers filled with fighter craft. They looked impressive. They were impressive, but against 500 hegemony warships, they were nothing. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the flagship Victory. He was 60 years old, a career military man who had never seen real combat. None of them had. There had been peace since the First Contact War. Peace that they now understood was just a pause. "All ships, hold position," he ordered. His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking. "We will buy time for the civilian evacuations." Buy time. Everyone knew what that meant. They would fight. They would die. And in the end, it would not matter. The hegemony fleet advanced slowly. They were in no hurry. They wanted the galaxy to see every moment. They wanted everyone to understand what happened to species that did not obey. And then something strange happened. A single ship emerged from behind the moon. It was small, old. Its hull was covered in patches and scars. One of its engines seemed to wobble slightly. It moved toward the hegemony fleet like a drunk man walking into a hurricane. On the bridge of the Eternal Judgment, tactical officers stared at their screens in confusion. "Sir," one of them said, "we have an unknown contact." Vorik looked up from his planning display. "Unknown? What do you mean unknown?" "The design does not match any current Terran vessels. It appears to be old, very old." Vorik walked to the main screen and studied the small ship. It was ugly, asymmetrical. Its weapons were strange tubes and cannons that looked like they belonged in a museum. Its hull was made of different metals welded together in a messy pattern. "Check the historical archives," he ordered. The tactical officer worked quickly. "Sir, the design matches records from 150 years ago. It is a frigate from the First Contact War. That war was..." He paused. "Sir, that war was supposed to be erased from our records." Vorik felt something cold in his stomach. Something he had not felt in many years. It might have been fear. "Impossible," he said. "Those ships were all destroyed. We made sure of that." But the evidence was right in front of him. The ship was real, and it was coming toward them. On the Mugunghwa, Taiho watched the massive fleet grow larger on his screen. 500 ships, each one 10 times the size of his frigate. each one carrying enough firepower to burn worlds. Jiwoo, he said, open a channel. All frequencies. Let everyone hear. Jiwoo worked her console. Channel open, Captain. Taiho stood up from his chair and faced the screen. He knew that his image was being broadcast across the galaxy. He knew that 1 billion beings were watching. He did not care. I am Captain Taiho of the Terran frigate Magonhwa, he said. His voice was calm and steady. You have entered human space with hostile intent. I am giving you one chance to leave. Silence. Then, across the hegemony fleet, laughter began. It started quietly, just a few officers chuckling at their consoles. Then it spread. Soon, the entire fleet was laughing. On 1,000 worlds, audiences laughed too. One ship. One small, old, ugly ship. And its captain was threatening them. Varric smiled. The cold feeling in his stomach faded. This was not a threat. This was a joke. One chance, he repeated, amused. Your entire species has one ship defending it, and you threaten us? Taiho did not smile. I'm not threatening. I'm warning. There's a difference. Then he cut the transmission. The laughter continued for a few more seconds. Then the Maganhwa began to accelerate. Not backward. Not away from danger. Directly toward the fleet. The laughter stopped. What is he doing? Varric demanded. Is he insane? He's accelerating, sir, the tactical officer reported. Heading straight for our formation. His speed is increasing. Sir, he's not stopping. On the Maganhwa, alarms began to sound. Yuna's voice came through the intercom. Captain, we're going too fast. The engines weren't designed for this kind of stress. Can they hold? Taiho asked. A pause. Probably. Good enough. Yunji's hands flew across her console. She was plotting a course that no computer would ever suggest. A path through the gaps in the enemy formation. A path that relied on speed and chaos and human instinct. I'm seeing their formation patterns, she reported. They're perfectly organized. Too perfect. They're not expecting anyone to attack. They're expecting us to run. Then let's surprise them, Taiho said. Dohan powered up the weapons. The rail cannons hummed with energy. The torpedo tubes opened. He had waited his entire life for this moment. Weapons ready, Captain, he said. Just give me a target. Jiwoo was already working on something different. She had broken into the hegemony's communication frequencies. She was listening to their chatter, their commands, their confusion. They're afraid, she said quietly. They won't admit it, but they're afraid. They don't understand why we're attacking. Grandma Suk sat in the medical bay, preparing bandages and medicine. She had done this before, 50 years ago. Her hands remembered the work even when her mind tried to forget. Young people, she muttered to herself, always in such a hurry to die. But she was smiling. Varric watched the small ship get closer. His tactical officers were feeding him data. The ship's speed, its trajectory, its weapon systems. Those are kinetic weapons, one officer said, confused. Magnetic acceleration cannons and... Are those nuclear warheads? Impossible, another officer said. No one uses kinetic weapons anymore. They're primitive, barbaric. They're primitive because they work, Varric said quietly. He remembered something from his training, something about the first contact war that his teachers had mentioned before telling him to forget it. The humans had won that war, not with advanced technology, with stubbornness, with weapons that were crude but effective. For the first time, he wondered if he had made a mistake. All ships, he ordered. Target that frigate. Destroy it immediately. On the Terran defense line, Admiral Park watched in shock as the old frigate charged toward the enemy fleet. Who is that? he demanded. That ship isn't in our records. No one had an answer. Sir, his communications officer said, we're receiving a message from Admiral Bora on the moon. Park's eyes widened. Bora, the legend. The last survivor of the First Contact War. He had thought she was dead. Put her through. Laura's old face appeared on the screen. She looked tired but determined. Admiral Park, she said, I recommend you hold your position and watch. Captain Taiho is about to remind the galaxy why they should never have come here. Park stared at her. One frigate? Against 500 ships? That's not a battle. That's suicide. Laura smiled. It was a cold smile. A smile that remembered things too terrible to speak. That's what the hegemony said 50 years ago, she replied. They were wrong then. They're wrong now. The Magengwa was close to the enemy fleet now. Energy beams began to fire. Blue light cutting through space toward the small ship. EUNG threw the ship into a spinning roll, dodging left, diving down, twisting in ways that made the crew's stomachs turn. The beams missed. Some came close. Some came very close. But none hit. Their targeting systems are automatic, she reported. They can't track irregular movement. They expect ships to fight logically. Then, let's be illogical, Taiho said. Dawn, pick a target. Dohan looked at his screen. 500 ships. Which one should die first? He chose a destroyer. Not the biggest ship. Not the smallest. Just a ship in the wrong place at the wrong time. Target acquired, he said. Firing. The rail cannon fired. There was no bright flash. No dramatic explosion. Just a tungsten rod the size of a car, accelerating to 3% of the speed of light. Crossing the distance between the ships in less than a second. The hegemony destroyer shields were designed to stop energy. They were not designed to stop mass traveling at relativistic speeds. The tungsten rod punched through the shields like they were not there. It entered the front of the ship and exited through the back, taking most of the ship's internal structure with it. The destroyer broke in half. Then it exploded. Across the galaxy, the laughter stopped. Vorik stared at his screen in disbelief. One shot, one single shot from a primitive weapon, and one of his ships was gone. Impossible, he whispered. But the debris floating in space told a different story. Energy beams from 100 ships sliced through space, enough firepower to turn a small moon into dust. Blue light filled the darkness. The heat of the weapons made space itself shimmer. This was power. This was technology perfected over 10,000 years. And the Magungwa danced through it like a leaf in a storm. Yunji's hands never stopped moving. She did not think. She did not plan. She let her instincts take control. The ship rolled left, dove down, twisted right, shot upward. Every movement was wrong by military standards. No training manual would ever teach these maneuvers. That was exactly why they worked. The hegemony targeting systems were designed to predict enemy movement. They were programmed with thousands of combat patterns, every logical response to every possible situation. But logic was not something the Magungwa cared about. How is that ship still alive? An officer screamed on the eternal judgment. Vorik had no answer. He watched his tactical display as beam after beam missed the small frigate. His ships were firing blindly, desperately, and hitting nothing but empty space. Focus fire, he commanded. All ships in Sector 7, concentrate on that target. 30 ships turned their weapons toward the Magungwa. 30 ships fired at once. The sky itself seemed to catch fire. Yunji saw the danger on her screen. She had 2 seconds to react. Hold on, she said calmly. She threw the ship into a barrel roll, spinning faster than the engines were designed to handle. The crew slammed against their restraints. Una screamed something from engineering that was probably not polite. The ship groaned, metal protesting against forces it was never meant to experience. But the beams missed. "Still alive," Taiho said. "Dawn, make them regret that." Dawn was already aiming. The rail cannons fired again. 2 more tungsten rods crossed the void in less than a heartbeat. 2 more destroyers died. The Magama was inside the enemy formation now, weaving between the massive warships like a fish swimming through seaweed. The hegemony's weapons were powerful but slow to turn. They were designed to fight at long range, where their superior technology gave them every advantage. Up close, they were clumsy, confused. "They can't shoot us without hitting each other," Jiwoo reported. "Their communication channels are going crazy. They don't know what to do." "Then let's make it worse," Taiho said. "Start the jamming." Jiwoo smiled and activated her programs. Suddenly, the hegemony's perfect communication network was filled with static. False orders appeared on their screens. Ships received commands to move in wrong directions, to fire at wrong targets. Chaos spread through the fleet like a disease. On the Eternal Judgment, Vorik watched his organized armada fall apart. Ships were bumping into each other. Weapons were firing at friendly vessels. Captains were screaming for orders that no one could give. "This is impossible," he whispered. "One ship cannot do this." But one ship was doing exactly this. In the engine room, Una worked like a woman possessed. Alarms were screaming. Panels were sparking. The power core was running at levels that should have caused an explosion 3 times over. "Come on, old girl," she muttered, patching cables with one hand and adjusting settings with the other. "Just a little more. You can do this." The ship answered with a surge of power that made the lights flicker. More power than any frigate should have. More than any frigate had ever had. "Una, what are you doing down there?" Taiho asked through the intercom. "Magic," she replied. "Don't ask questions." He did not ask questions. Dawn fired again and again. Each shot was precise. Each shot found its target. The hegemony ships had shields that could block anything in the galaxy. Anything except a solid chunk of metal moving faster than thought. A cruiser lost its engine section. A destroyer had its weapons melted by a nuclear torpedo that slipped past its defenses. A carrier broke apart when a tungsten round punctured its reactor core. The watching galaxy was silent. On 100 worlds, species who had never dared to resist the hegemony watched the battle with wide eyes. They saw the small, ugly ship tearing through the greatest fleet ever assembled. They saw primitive weapons destroying advanced technology. They saw something they had forgotten was possible: resistance. Vorik's face was twisted with rage. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded. 17 destroyed, sir. 23 damaged. 17. Nearly 20 ships, worth more than the entire economy of some planets. Lost to a single frigate crewed by humans. "Pull back," he ordered. "All ships, pull back to long range. We will regroup and—" "Sir," the tactical officer interrupted. "The frigate is pursuing. They're not letting us disengage." Vorik stared at the screen. The Maganwa was chasing them. Chasing 500 warships with 1 damaged frigate. It was insane. It was impossible. It was human. On the Maganwa, the situation was not as perfect as it appeared. The hull had taken damage. Compartments were venting atmosphere. The shields, what little shields they had, were completely gone. Grandma Suk moved through the ship with her medical bag, treating injuries that appeared faster than she could heal them. A gunner with burns on his arms. A sensor operator with glass in her eyes. Everyone was bleeding. Everyone was hurting, and no one was stopping. "You're all going to die," she told them as she worked. "You know that, right?" "Probably," the gunner replied. "But not yet." She patched his arm and moved to the next patient. "Captain," Unji said, her voice tight with strain, "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. The ship is damaged. My reflexes are slowing." Taiho looked at his navigator. She had been flying for 6 hours straight, pulling maneuvers that would make a trained pilot sick. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were bloodshot. "Just a little longer," he said. "We're hurting them. We're really hurting them." "The fleet is reforming," Jiwoo reported. "They're pulling back to a defensive formation. Long range only. They won't let us get close again." Taiho nodded. He had expected this. The hegemony was not stupid. They would not keep making the same mistake. "Then we changed tactics," he said. "Daohan, status on the torpedoes?" 27 nuclear warheads remaining. Set them for wide dispersal. Maximum yield. Daohan understood immediately. They could not hit the ships directly from long range, but they could fill space with fire and radiation. They could make the void itself deadly. Dispersal pattern set. Ready to fire. All tubes. All tubes. Fire everything. 27 torpedoes launched into the darkness. They spread out like seeds in the wind, heading toward the distant fleet. The hegemony's point defense systems activated, lasers cutting through space to intercept the incoming weapons. They destroyed most of them. Most. 6 torpedoes reached their targets. 6 nuclear explosions lit up the void like new suns. Ships caught in the blast were vaporized instantly. Ships at the edges were crippled, their shields overloaded by the electromagnetic pulses. 12 more ships died. Vorik stood in silence as his fleet burned around him. He had brought 500 warships to destroy one species. One species with one ship. And that ship had just killed nearly 30 of his vessels. "Admiral," his second officer said quietly, "perhaps we should consider what?" Vorik snapped. "Retreat? Surrender? Strategic withdrawal. We could return with reinforcements." "Plan a more careful." "No." Vorik's voice was like ice. "We will not run from one ship. The galaxy is watching. If we run now, every subjugated species will see. They will start to hope. They will start to believe they can fight back." He straightened his uniform and stared at the screen. "We will destroy that frigate, whatever it costs. Send in the heavy cruisers. I want that ship dead." The hegemony fleet began to move forward again. This time, they came in force. Massive cruisers, each one half a kilometer long, led the advance. Their shields were stronger. Their weapons were bigger. They would not be so easily surprised. On the Mugunghwa, alarms screamed new warnings. The engines were failing. The weapons were overheating. The crew was exhausted. "Here they come," Yunji said. "A lot of them." Taiho looked at his battered crew, his damaged ship, his empty weapon systems. "Then let's give them something to remember," he said. The Mugunghwa turned to face the advancing fleet. One small ship against hundreds. One crew against thousands. The battle continued. 11 hours of fire and death and impossible survival. 11 hours of a small ship dancing through hell. 11 hours that the galaxy would never forget. When it was finally over, the Mugunghwa was barely alive. 17 of her 23 compartments had been destroyed. Holes in her hull opened to the cold vacuum of space. Fires burned in sections that had no more oxygen to feed them. Her engines sputtered and coughed, producing just enough power to keep her floating. 3 of her crew were dead. First Sergeant Minho, the damage control specialist, had been killed when a beam punched through the lower decks. He had sealed the breach with his own body, giving others time to escape. Lieutenant Hana, the sensor operator, had died at her station, eyes still watching the screens even as the explosion took her. And young Junho, the assistant gunner, had been standing next to a power conduit when it exploded. He was 19 years old. Grandma Suk had closed her eyes and said a prayer for each of them. Then she had returned to work because the living still needed her. Yuna sat in the engine room, surrounded by broken machinery and burnt cables. Her hands were black with grease and red with blood from cuts she could not remember getting. The reactor was running on emergency power only. If she stopped working for even a minute, it would fail completely. Just a little longer, she whispered to the machine. Just hold together a little longer. On the bridge, Taiho sat in his captain's chair and stared at the battlefield. Debris floated everywhere. Pieces of ships from hegemony, some the fragments of torpedoes drifted in the silence of space. 78 hegemony warships had been destroyed. Completely destroyed, turned into scattered metal and frozen bodies. 214 more were damaged so badly they could not fight. Their engines were dead. Their weapons were melted. Their crews were screaming for help that would not come. The remaining ships, the survivors of the greatest armada ever assembled, had retreated to the edge of the solar system. They floated there in damaged formation, unable to advance, unwilling to retreat further. Among them was the Eternal Judgment, Admiral Vorek's flagship. It had taken 3 direct hits from the rail cannons. Its shields had failed. Its secondary weapons were gone. But it was still alive, and so was Vorek. Taiho looked at his tactical display. The flagship was damaged, but not destroyed. Vorek was still out there, still watching. "Jiwoo," Taiho said. His voice was rough from hours of shouting orders. "Open a channel to the flagship." Jiwoo worked her console with fingers that trembled from exhaustion. "Channel open, Captain." Taiho stood. His uniform was torn. Blood from a wound on his forehead had dried on his face. He looked like a man who had fought through hell and somehow come out the other side. He looked exactly like what he was. Vorek's face appeared on the screen. The Admiral looked older than he had 11 hours ago. The confidence was gone from his eyes. In its place was something else. Something that might have been respect. Or fear. Or both. "You wanted to teach the galaxy a lesson," Taiho said. His voice was quiet but carried across the void between their ships. "Let me teach you one instead." Vorek said nothing. He just watched Taiho lean forward. "We don't build ships to last. We build them to fight. We don't train soldiers to survive. We train them to win. You brought 500 warships to exterminate a species you called primitive. And one old frigate crewed by veterans, outcasts, and people who refused to die stopped you." He paused. Let the words sink in. "Go home, Admiral. Tell your tribunal what happened here. Tell them that humanity doesn't submit. We don't surrender. And if you come back with 1,000 ships, with 10,000, we will meet you with everything we have. Not because we want to die, but because we refuse to live on our knees." The smile that crossed Taiho's face had no warmth in it. It was the smile of someone who had looked death in the eye and had not blinked. "You can kill us, maybe, eventually, but it will cost you more than you can imagine. Is that a price you're willing to pay?" Vorek stared at the human captain for a long moment. In the background of the transmission, Vorek could see the rest of the bridge crew. An old woman treating a wound on a young officer's arm. An engineer covered in grease, still monitoring systems that should have failed hours ago. A navigator slumped in her chair, unconscious from exhaustion, but still breathing. These were not soldiers from a powerful military. These were not warriors from an advanced civilization. These were the forgotten, the rejected, the ones their own society had thrown away, and they had just defeated his fleet. Why? Vorek finally asked. Why fight when you cannot win? Why die for a battle that should be impossible? Taiho considered the question. Because giving up is worse than dying. Because the alternative is accepting that we are less than what we could be. Because every single person on this ship believed that fighting was better than surrendering, even if fighting meant death. He straightened. That is what makes us human. That is what you will never understand. And that is why you will never truly defeat us. The transmission ended. Vorik stood on his damaged bridge, surrounded by officers who would not meet his eyes. The broadcast drones had recorded everything. The galaxy had seen everything. They had watched the mightiest fleet ever assembled being torn apart by one small ship. The message was clear. Humans were not prey. They were not easy targets. They were something else entirely. Admiral, his second officer said quietly, "What are your orders?" Vorik looked at the distant blue planet, Earth, so small, so fragile, so impossibly stubborn. "We withdraw," he said, "back to hegemony space. We will report to the tribunal. And the humans?" Vorik did not answer. He turned away from the viewport and walked off the bridge. The hegemony fleet limped away. Ships that could move under their own power helped ships that could not. It was a slow, painful retreat. A retreat that the galaxy watched in stunned silence. On 1,000 worlds, species who had lived under hegemony rule for millennia began to whisper. They had been told that resistance was impossible. They had been told that the hegemony was invincible. They had believed it because they had never seen anyone fight back. Now they had a single ship, a handful of outcasts, and they had made the masters of the galaxy run away. If one old frigate could do that, what else was possible? The Magangla limped back toward Earth. Her engines barely worked. Their systems were failing one by one. But she was moving, still alive, still defiant. Word of the battle had spread. The population of Earth had watched the impossible victory from their homes, their offices, their ships. They had watched one of their own stand against an armada and refused to back down. By the time Magangla reached Earth orbit, a crowd had gathered. Ships of every size filled the space around the planet. Civilian vessels, cargo ships, personal shuttles, all of them waiting to welcome their heroes home. Bora stood at the front of the crowd. When the shuttle landed, she was crying. It was the first time she had cried in decades. Taiho stepped off the shuttle first. He looked terrible. He looked wonderful. He was alive, and that was more than anyone had expected. "You did it," Bora said quietly. "We did it," Taiho corrected. He looked back at his crew as they followed him out. Yuna, walking with a limp she would carry for the rest of her life. Yunji, supported by 2 medics but still conscious. Dahun, silent and shaken but unbroken. Jiwoo, young and exhausted and somehow still smiling. And Grandma Suk, last of all. She walked slowly, her cane tapping against the deck. She looked up at the sky, at the stars that were a little less hostile now. "Not bad," she said to no one in particular. Not bad for a bunch of idiots in an old ship. The celebration lasted for days. Speeches were made. Medals were given. Historians began writing the story of the battle. A story that would be told for generations. But in the shipyards above Earth, the real work was already beginning. Engineers studied the Magangla's designs. They examined her weapons, her engines, her old and stubborn systems. They asked questions. They took notes. They started building. If one frigate could hold off 500 warships, what could 10 frigates do? What could 100? The hegemony would return. Everyone knew that. They would come back with more ships, more weapons, more determination to finish what they had started. But when they returned, they would not find the same weak species they had tried to destroy. They would find humanity. Angry, Prepared and remembering, Taeho stood at a window overlooking the construction yards. New ships were taking shape. New weapons were being built. Volunteers were signing up faster than the military could process them. Beside him, Yoonji watched the activity with quiet eyes. "It's not over," she said. "No," Taeho agreed. "It's just beginning." She nodded. "What happens next?" Taeho watched a new ship's frame being welded together. It was based on the Magungwa's design, but bigger, stronger, uglier. "We get ready," he said. "We train. We build. And when they come back, we show them that what happened today wasn't luck. It wasn't a fluke. It was a preview." He smiled, and this time there was warmth in it. Hope. The galaxy thought we were alone, weak, easy to ignore. Now they know the truth. And the truth is this: humanity doesn't give up. We don't surrender. We don't know how to lose. He turned away from the window. "Come on. We have work to do." Behind them, the stars waited, patient, endless, full of dangers and wonders and enemies who would soon learn what humanity really was.